It seems like every time I open the news, there's another story about some company getting hit with a cyber attack or some big data breach. It's like,
Yeah.
it's enough to make anyone paranoid about, just being online.
Right.
But how do these companies even start to fight back against all of these attacks? I mean, it seems like
Yeah.
the bad guys are always one step ahead.
Right.
So today we're going to take a deep dive into one of the most important parts of cybersecurity, and that is the detects phase from the NIST Cybersecurity Framework.
It's a really great question. And you're right. It used to be that companies just thought about building stronger firewalls and just hoping that would be enough.
Right.
But these days, you really need to know if someone is actually trying to break in, even if they haven't actually gotten through yet.
Okay.
And that's where detection really comes in.
So it's almost like having a security system for your entire network.
Yeah. Yeah.
But how do you actually detect one of these cyber attacks? I mean, they seem so stealthy. Like, how do you even know that something's happening before it's too late?
Well, you have to start with the assumption that no defense is perfect.
Okay.
Attacks are going to happen.
Okay.
The key is to minimize the damage and the time that it takes to find the threat and neutralize it.
Right.
And that's where continuous monitoring becomes super important.
Okay, so when you say continuous monitoring, I'm thinking of like, someone sitting in a dark room staring at a computer screen full of logs all day.
Yeah.
Is that what we're talking about? Or what kind of tech goes into this?
No, not at all.
Okay.
We're talking about automated systems that are analyzing network traffic, login attempts, file activity, all of that stuff in real time.
Okay.
So you've got intrusion detection systems or IDS that are always looking for suspicious patterns.
Okay.
And then you have security information and event management systems or SIMs.
Okay.
And those collect and analyze logs from the entire network to help spot anomalies.
Okay, so it's like you've got these IDS, which are kind of like the virtual guard dogs,
Yeah.
sniffing out any kind of trouble.
Yeah.
And then you've got the SIMs, which are kind of like the security cameras that are constantly recording.
Yeah.
Even with all of this technology in place, aren't there some attacks that are just so subtle that you can't catch them with this kind of system?
Not all attacks are just smash and grab, Some of them are designed to stay hidden for a long time and slowly siphon off data.
Okay.
That's where anomaly detection comes in.
Okay.
And it's all about establishing a baseline of what normal behavior looks like on the network.
So you're basically training the system to recognize what's normal.
Exactly.
So then it knows when something abnormal is happening.
Yeah, you're teaching the system to recognize a digital bad dog.
Got it.
So to speak.
So how do you actually teach a computer system what normal is and what's not normal?
Well, that's where things get really, really interesting. We use something called behavioral analytics. Think of it as like algorithms that are trained on massive amounts of data to recognize patterns and deviations from those patterns.
Right.
For example, you could have a user who normally only accesses files within their own department. And then all of a sudden they start downloading gigabytes of data from a sensitive research database at 3:00 a.m.
Okay. Yeah, that's...
They're going to raise some red flags.
Yeah, that's a little suspicious.
Exactly.
So the system flags that as potentially malicious.
Yeah.
What happens then? Does a human actually have to step in at that point?
Well, it kind of depends on how the system is set up.
Okay.
Sometimes it will just trigger an alert for a security analyst to go in and investigate.
Right.
Other times it might automatically take action, like blocking the user's access or quarantining the system.
Okay, so it's a combination of human intelligence and artificial intelligence kind of working together to keep things safe and secure.
Right.
But what about after an attack happens? Is it just a matter of damage control at that point?
Not at all.
Okay.
Remember all those digital breadcrumbs we were talking about?
Yeah.
Those detailed logs of everything that's happening on the network?
Right.
Those are crucial for understanding how an attack actually happened, not just that it happened.
So it's like a digital crime scene investigation.
Yeah, exactly.
You're trying to follow the attacker's footsteps to see exactly how they got in and what they did.
Those logs can tell you what systems were accessed, what data was touched, even what commands were executed.
Wow.
It's really valuable information.
So logs are like a gold mine of information for investigators.
Exactly.
But how do companies stay ahead of the curve?
Right.
It seems like the bad guys are always coming up with new tricks, new ways to get in.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's where threat intelligence comes in.
Okay.
It's about gathering information from external sources, like threat feeds, cybersecurity reports, information sharing between different organizations.
So it's almost like a global intelligence network for cybersecurity.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
You've got researchers who are analyzing new malware, sharing indicators of compromise and updating detection rules.
How effective is all of that, though? Because, I mean, it seems like
Yeah.
malware is always evolving. It's always changing.
Right. It's a constant arms race.
Okay.
The bad guys are always finding new ways to hide their code and bypass defenses.
So how do you keep up with that?
Well, machine learning is becoming really important.
Okay.
It's about training algorithms to spot those subtle anomalies that traditional rule-based systems might miss.
It sounds very complex.
It is.
So we've got all these layers of defense, the continuous monitoring, the anomaly detection, the threat intelligence. It seems like a lot to manage.
Yeah.
But even with all of this stuff in place,
Yeah.
isn't it still possible that an attack could slip through the cracks?
You're absolutely right. No system is foolproof.
Okay.
That's why having a robust incident response plan is so important.
Okay, now this is where things, I think, start to get really interesting incident response.
Yeah.
This is when the alarm bells actually go off and you have to jump into action.
Exactly.
So tell me more about what happens.
Well, think of it like a fire drill, but for cyber attacks.
Okay.
Everybody needs to know their role and the steps to take so that panic doesn't take over.
Right.
The first step is usually containment.
Hold on. Let's save that for part 2.
All right.
Because I think incident response deserves its own deep dive.
I agree.
All right, so
We'll pick up there next time.
we'll come back next time and break down exactly what it takes to contain, eradicate, and recover from a cyber attack.
Great.
This is way more exciting than any cybersecurity thriller I've ever seen.
I can't wait
It is pretty exciting.
to talk more about this.
Yeah.
See you in part 2.
See you then. So we left off talking about incident response and what happens when, all the alarms go off, signaling a potential attack.
Yeah, I'm ready to dive into the nitty-gritty of incident response.
I mean, it's one thing to detect a threat,
Right,
but how do you actually respond to it?
right,
That's where the real action is.
right. You begin with a plan,
Okay.
and not just any plan.
Right.
A well-rehearsed, detailed incident response plan.
Okay.
It's your cybersecurity playbook.
Got it.
It guides your team's every move when an attack happens.
So less flying by the seat of your pants and more
Yeah, exactly.
having a strategy in place.
It starts with containment,
Okay.
which aims to limit the damage and prevent the attack from spreading.
Okay, so like if you've got a virus spreading through a network,
Right.
you want to quarantine it before it infects the whole thing.
Exactly. You want to isolate those infected areas.
So how do you actually contain something like that? What are the tools or the steps involved?
Well, there are a lot of different approaches. But disconnecting compromised devices from the network is often the first step.
Okay.
You're basically pulling the plug on a machine that's behaving erratically.
Right.
You might also shut down certain services or implement temporary firewalls to kind of isolate the affected areas.
So it's about cutting off access
Right.
and preventing the threat from spreading.
Exactly.
But what about actually getting rid of the threat?
Right.
That's where eradication comes in, right?
Exactly. Eradication is all about removing the threat completely from those systems.
Okay.
This could involve running antivirus scans to find and remove malware,
Right.
restoring systems from backups to a point before the infection happened,
Okay.
or in really severe cases, you might have to completely rebuild systems from scratch.
Wow, rebuilding a system from scratch.
Yeah.
That sounds like
It's a last resort for sure.
yeah.
It's time-consuming and resource-intensive,
Right.
but sometimes it's the only way to guarantee that the threat is completely gone.
So it's like the digital equivalent of burning down a house to get rid of termites.
Exactly.
Okay, so you've contained the threat, you've eradicated it.
Right.
What's next?
Well, then comes the recovery phase.
Right.
And this is where you focus on getting those affected systems back up and running as smoothly and as quickly as possible.
Right, because time is money, especially when those critical systems are down.
Exactly. So recovery can involve a variety of actions.
Okay.
Restoring data from backups is usually a key part of that.
Oh, right.
You might also need to reinstall software,
Mhm.
reconfigure systems, and then test everything really thoroughly.
So you're not just getting things back to normal, you're
Mm-mm.
also trying to make sure they stay that way.
You're trying to prevent it from happening again.
So there's a lot of firefighting involved in incident response, but there's also this element of rebuilding and improving for the future.
That's a great way to put it. And that brings us to the lessons learned stage,
Okay.
which is often overlooked, but it's really, really important.
The post-game analysis.
Exactly.
What's the purpose of this lessons learned stage?
Well, after an incident, it's crucial to take a step back and analyze what happened, how it happened,
Right.
and how to prevent it from happening again.
So you're trying to figure out how to strengthen your defenses.
You're turning a negative experience into a positive learning opportunity.
So give me an example. What kind of lesson might you learn from an incident like this?
Well, let's say you discover that a phishing attack was successful
Okay.
because your employees weren't trained to recognize it.
Right.
That's valuable information
Yeah.
that you can use to improve your security awareness training.
So it's not just reactive. It's
Yeah.
also proactive.
Exactly.
You're using each incident to learn and adapt.
And ultimately make your organization more resilient.
Okay. So this has been super helpful.
Good.
But before we wrap up part 2,
Okay.
I'm curious, what are some of the biggest challenges that people face when it comes to incident response?
That's a great question. One of the biggest challenges is just dealing with the sheer volume and complexity of attacks these days.
Okay.
The threat landscape is constantly evolving
Right.
with new attack vectors emerging all the time.
So it's like you're trying to hit a moving target. How do you even keep up?
Well, staying informed about those latest threats and vulnerabilities is critical.
Right.
Threat intelligence plays a huge role in incident response.
But even with all of that intelligence, even with all of that information,
Yeah.
doesn't the human element still play a huge role?
You're absolutely right.
Because ultimately it's people who are making the decisions and taking action.
Technology is a crucial part of incident response, but it's not everything.
Okay.
You need skilled security professionals who can analyze the situation, make quick decisions,
Right.
and execute the plan effectively.
Hold on.
Okay.
I think we need to save that for part 3.
Okay.
We're running out of time for this segment.
Right.
I think this human element of incident response
Yeah,
deserves its own deep dive.
I agree.
All right, so we'll come back next time and explore that human element of incident response.
Sounds good.
This incident response journey is getting more and more fascinating by the minute.
It is.
I can't wait to talk more about it.
Looking forward to it.
See you in part 3.
See you then.
So we're back for the final part of our deep dive into incident response, and I'm really excited to pick up where we left off.
Yeah, me too. It's been a great conversation.
It has been, and at the end of part 2, we were starting to talk about this idea that incident response isn't just about technology.
Right.
It's about the people involved.
Exactly.
So let's talk more about that human element.
Okay.
What makes a great incident responder? What kind of skills and expertise are we talking about?
Well, you hit the nail on the head when you said it's not just about the technology.
Right.
You can have all the fancy tools and systems in the world, but if you don't have skilled people to operate them,
Right.
it's not going to be effective.
It's like having a state-of-the-art fire truck, but no trained firefighters.
Exactly.
So what are we talking about here? What makes someone good at this?
It's a combination of technical proficiency, analytical thinking, and strong communication skills.
Okay, so break that down for me.
Okay, so incident responders need to be able to understand complex technical concepts, analyze large amounts of data, identify patterns,
Okay.
and draw conclusions quickly and accurately.
So they're kind of like digital detectives,
Yeah.
piecing together clues to solve a cybercrime.
Exactly.
But you also mentioned communication. Why is that so important?
Communication is absolutely crucial because during an incident, you have multiple teams that are working together,
Right.
often under intense pressure.
Yeah.
So you need to have really clear and concise communication between those teams.
So everyone's on the same page.
Exactly. Everyone needs to know what's going on, what needs to be done.
It's like a well-coordinated orchestra. Everyone has to be playing the right notes at the right time.
Exactly.
But even with the best team in the world and
Yeah.
the best communication,
Right.
incident response
Yeah,
can still be incredibly challenging.
it is.
So what are some of the biggest hurdles that incident responders face?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is just dealing with the unexpected. Cyber attacks are constantly evolving, and attackers are always coming up with new tricks.
Right.
So incident responders need to be able to adapt really quickly to new situations.
So you can't just follow a script.
Right, you have to think on your feet.
You have to be able to improvise.
Exact.
What else makes incident response so difficult?
Another big challenge is managing the psychological impact of a cyber attack.
Okay.
These events can be incredibly stressful for everyone involved.
Right.
There's often this sense of urgency, you're racing against the clock to contain the damage.
Yeah, I can imagine the pressure's immense.
Yeah, it is.
It's not just about the technology. It's about people's livelihoods, sensitive data, the company's reputation.
Right, it's a big deal.
So how do incident responders deal with all of that pressure?
Well, it's really important to have strong leadership and a supportive organizational culture.
Okay.
Incident responders need to know that they have the support of their organization and that their well-being is a priority.
So it's about recognizing that incident responders are human beings,
Exactly.
not just machines.
They need support and resources
Right.
to do their jobs effectively,
And to cope with all the stress.
to cope with the stress.
Okay, so this has been incredibly insightful.
Good.
I'm really starting to understand just how complex and multifaceted incident response really is.
It is.
Do you have any final thoughts for our listeners about this critical area of cybersecurity?
Well, I think the key takeaway is that incident response is a journey, not a destination.
Okay.
The threats are constantly changing, so you
Right.
need to be constantly learning and adapting.
Always improving.
Exactly.
Well, this has been fascinating. I feel like I've learned so much,
Me too.
and I really appreciate you sharing your expertise with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
So that wraps up our deep dive into the world of cybersecurity incident response. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, stay safe out there.